I got to see something real quick. Curiosities. Oh, you forgot it. Yeah. Jesus Christ. All right. I'm over it. Jeez. All right. One more time. One more time. Oh, before we get to that, I guess we kind of had pretty much everything. What was the place? Okay, we know what happened to the Alamo. And banning slavery was the big issue that triggered the War of Texas Independence. But what was the other place where Texans were massacred by the Mexican army, leading to a rallying cry? Yeah, Goliad. And so what was the name for people who lived in Tejas before the immigration from the United States? Remember their name? It was Tejas, or they were Tejanos. Tejanos. I should add, the Tejanos lost almost everything. Texan immigrants took up almost everything. And I'm trying to get past this. We got to here? Did we get Texas down? We just brought down the election. Over here? Oh, perfect. Okay, so Van Buren's going to run again. And remember, he is tainted by not just the panic, which he's going to be blamed for, but also not taking a position on Texas, especially Southern Democrats didn't trust him. So we have this anti-elite minority, split the nativism. Nativism is anti-what? Yeah, anti-immigrant. So the point is, they're going to blame the immigrants, immigrants for all the problems. Why is there a panic? Why is there unemployment? All those German immigrants, all those Catholic immigrants. Immigrants are taking your jobs. Immigrants are ruining your schools. Immigrants are taking your homes and making houses expensive. It's immigrants' fault. So it's very nativism, which is always pretty interesting because virtually everybody, well, heck, everybody in the Americas came from someplace else and was an immigrant by definition. The Woodlands people, the first peoples, came from Asia too, 14,000 years ago. So it's really to divide people, to divide the working class. And the second thing would be cultural. Find cultural issues. And they try to figure out what made Jackson popular. Okay, we don't want his policies, or at least not so much his policies, but for what he stands for. You know, the anti-elite, anti-wealth, Jackson was anti-elite control. Jackson was pro-democracy. And so they would try to say, hey, we're just like you. We're frontiersmen. We live in log cabins too. Not our mansions. We live in a log cabin. And they try to find a cultural issue that would split. And it took a while. They started at first in the early 1840s, their Whig plan, to sell an image of the common man, not really a common man. And their first effort was Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett in the early 1830s was an experiment, basically, by Whigs to find somebody who they could say was like Andrew Jackson, a frontiersman. They would dress in leather, or he would dress in deerskin and would wear a coonskin hat. And here he is in the Davy Crockett Almanac. And they made this whole character of him out there, born in the log cabin, killing a bear when he was only 3 years old, fighting on the frontier. This whole story about Davy Crockett to sell the common man and say that he's a common man, but also have Whig policies. Today, we would call this the culture wars. The culture wars. With the idea of culture is more important than economics. And Davy Crockett is going to become nationally known, especially because he had this really big and relatively successful campaign. And then he had a spectacular fall from grace because he was also considered to be totally incompetent and ineffective legislator. Even though I will add, he was one of the people who was right in front of the Treasury when Andrew Jackson was nearly assassinated, and he helped pull Jackson off of Lawrence before Jackson beat him to death. Davy Crockett happened to be there, but he had to resign his seat in disgrace, and that is why he went to Texas to rehabilitate his image and got caught at the Alamo right here. So Davy Crockett would be used, and then they try to kind of push the Whigs as the party of Davy Crockett. And it stuck for a long time. But then this certain little company that was about ready to go out of business because they spent too much on an amusement park, got a TV contract and made a show called Davy Crockett. Yes, the amusement park was Disneyland. And no one thought it would work, and they nearly went broke. And Davy Crockett became a cultural phenomenon. And that is why all around the world people know the name Davy Crockett. And that's Bess Parker who starred in it. They only made like 3-hour-long episodes. It wasn't going to be the whole thing about Davy Crockett. The theme song, which they literally made up. I don't know how he did that. Took about an hour to record it, became a #1 song in the United States and Britain. Anyone ever heard this song before? Anyone? So like 6 of us, 7 of us. So they had them fighting American Indians. I'll get back to this. We're going to keep listening until it can't get out of here. It's an earworm. It's catchy. Just listen. See? Mountaintop in the wilderness. Here. Built him a bar when he was only 3. That fit in with the whole story about Davy Crockett. And it became a cultural phenomenon in the United States. People started buying so many coonskin hats that they literally killed millions of raccoons to make them. And they nearly went extinct in certain parts of the United States, which is kind of mind-boggling. They used real coonskin hats by Davy Crockett. Little saddlebag. Look at it, he looked just like Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett lunchbox. I had a Davy Crockett little thermos. Here's Bess Parker with a bunch of little Davy Crockett's, the star. I mean, it became a cultural phenomenon, but it also gave me an excuse to show you something that when I was about 6 or 7, I would have wanted so bad. The Davy Crockett Alamo. Would anybody else have wanted this at 6 or 7? I don't mean today. Okay, maybe some of you might want it today, but 6 or 7, come on. That would have been pretty cool. Even if you don't think so, act like it would have been pretty cool. So, and that gives me a chance to tell you about one of the craziest things ever made. So here is the Davy Crockett Lego. And here is the Davy Crockett recoilless rifle. The Army was jealous in the 1950s that they didn't have enough nuclear weapons. They had artillery shells, but the Air Force got most of the nuclear weapons. So they had artillery shells that could fire a 10 to 15 kiloton weapon about 8 miles. It was a 15 kiloton weapon that was dropped off the machine. The Army had a bunch, but they wanted something more that could be portable by just 3 men. And so it was called a recoilless rifle that would shoot about maybe 2,000 yards, and it carried a 5 kiloton nuclear weapon. And they called it the Davy Crockett. And it's the craziest weapon ever made. Not only was it dirty, meaning a lot of fallout, it would kill the crew that fired it. It's the craziest thing ever made. And they still had them in West Germany during the Cold War up to the 1980s. We made these. We as a country. It's a miracle we're all still here. If we're crazy enough to make weapons. And I'm not exaggerating that. But here's the Lego version of the Davy Crockett. It's so insane. Of course, the Cold War, there was a lot of insanity. The Davy Crockett, the most insane weapon, that just gives you an idea what was going on. But let's find a different one. Another Davy Crockett, but who's better? William Henry Harrison. He got second in the election of 1836. And so the Whigs are thinking, let's find a Jackson. And they chose Harrison. He's a Westerner. And they can pick that Westerner vote, the rough-hewn frontiersman, the settler, and portray that image. I'll explain the cartoon in just 1 second. And get some Democrats' votes. Because this is something the Whigs are starting to understand. That the Democrats would take some time. First off, for president, it's not a nationwide election. It's not a nationwide election today. It's only an election in certain states where the Electoral College, where there might be a chance they can win the Electoral College. I mean, today, they only campaign in a few states. If you paid attention to 2024, if you ever saw an ad, that was only because it was to a nationwide audience. Especially the Democrats who wasted a bunch of money on it. They only campaigned in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, to a lesser degree, a little bit Iowa and, or sorry, Ohio and Iowa. But these three, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. That's the only place they campaign. Because that's where they have a chance to turn electoral votes. Montana, don't care. Not because of how few electoral votes, but because Montana is going to, used to not be like that way, but today it's going to vote Republican. And so it doesn't matter. The votes for the Democrat don't matter. The votes for Republican are always going to be enough. Same thing with California. It's always going to vote Democratic. So as a president, they don't care. And that's what they're starting to realize. And something else. Who decides elections? Any group of voters who are not very well informed. Low information. Doesn't mean they're dumb. People are very intelligent, but life is difficult. Life is hard. You have responsibilities and maybe not know the information. So if you can persuade them, it's that 10% who don't really pay attention. Doesn't mean they're not smart, but they just don't know. And they're learning it right here. If we can persuade him that Harrison's just like Jackson, we can win. And so they avoided the issues and talked culture. What did they talk about? Harrison was the victor of the Battle of Tippecanoe. Tippecanoe. Also, the Battle of the Thames during the War of 1812, one of the few victories. Tecumseh's Confederacy that the U.S. feared so much was defeated at Tippecanoe. Tecumseh died at the Thames. So a battle 29 years before the election was all the Whigs talked about and avoided anything that might be controversial. What about Texas? The Battle of Tippecanoe. What about the tariff? The Battle of the Thames. And have you seen his log cabin? And Harrison was incredibly wealthy. He was from a rich Virginia family. He had a massive estate in Indiana and tobacco plantations in Kentucky. He was an incredibly rich man who grew up in a mansion. Jackson grew up with nothing. Van Buren grew up with nothing. But he said, it's the same. He's out in the West. And he secretly supported Clay's American system that was so controversial. Remember, that's tariff, Bank of the U.S., internal improvements. But he never talked about it. Now, Democrats tried to say he's nothing but a puppet for Henry Clay. Huh? Right now. Quick run. Quick. Here's Henry Clay and Daniel Webster playing him like a puppet. So he's like a puppet. And the political dancing, they call those little jumping jacks. Those little puppets like that. And they say he's nothing but a puppet of Clay. Democrats are like, can't you understand? He's not telling the truth because he wants to hide what he really thinks. Policies that will benefit a narrow few Americans. But what do they respond with? Tippecanoe. And this is where the idea came from. Policies that would benefit an elite few. Basically, northern capitalists. But play like a common man. Would this be effective? Incredibly effective. Incredibly. Is it used today? Oh. Wow, is it used today? We have incredibly rich people who would try to portray themselves as just like everybody else. A defender of regular people. And it's used all the time, and it starts right here. It's very clever by the Whigs. And this is international. This is a political phenomenon that you see all over the world because it's so effective. They don't need every vote, just that narrow group in the center. Not really I don't think center politically, but the ones who, they don't follow enough so they can waver back and forth. And they learn cultural issues are easier and can be more divisive than economic. Going back to the first two parties, the Federalists and the Republicans, the cultural issue about being pro-British or not pro-British, are you a traitor or with us, was a much more effective issue than worry about the assumption bill. Same thing here. Tariff, economic issues, Bank of the United States, confusing. Most people don't understand that. So talk about immigrants are taking your jobs in the Battle of Tippecanoe. Think about today. Over and over again, the same arguments about, let's say, immigration or cultural issues are used all the time because real issues about, hey, let's talk about how intricate the tax code is. And people just go, oh my God, that's so complex. I'm going to act like I don't care. That's what I know it's an act. I don't want to admit I don't know. It's really effective. It's really effective. So, let me backtrack here. The problem is he's a Northerner. And he represents Northern interests. And Henry Clay, even though he's from Kentucky, he represented the Northern Catholics. There's also Southern Whigs too. So they had to get something for Southern Whigs because they know they need every single vote possible. So they picked John Tyler as the vice president and came up with the first great political slogan in history, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. So you had Northern Whigs that were pro-business but hated democracy, and they could rally around Harrison. And Southern Whigs, who were more the plantation owners, but they hate democracy too, and picked John Tyler. Tyler was a Democrat, but he left the Democratic Party like Calhoun did because they realized Calhoun wasn't going to defend plantation slavery. Did I say Calhoun? He left the Democratic Party like Calhoun did because Jackson wasn't going to defend plantation slavery. Jackson was going to defend slavery, but not the kind they wanted. So they could say to Northerners, don't worry about John Tyler. Don't worry about Southern Whigs who don't want the American system. We got our guy. Don't worry. Don't. We're okay. Tippecanoe, right? And they can tell Southern Whigs, don't worry about the American system. We got our guy. He's vice president. He's going to have power. Don't worry. Everything's fine. We just won't talk about it. So that was the campaign strategy. And then push culture. He's like one of us. He's like one of us, they could tell people. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. And you see the advantage of campaign slogans, especially for people who don't really follow politics that close, which is a lot of people then and a lot of people today. What do you have to know about it? Just remember the slogan, right? It's just a slogan. Hey, I'm for him. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. I'm with that. Now, there'd be slogans during the rest of the century. They wouldn't be as effective. Wide Awake was pretty effective for Lincoln, but 20th century was more modern. For example, Teddy Roosevelt had a great slogan. I pledge to you a square deal. His cousin Franklin Roosevelt, even better slogan. I pledge to you and I pledge to the American people a new deal. John Kennedy had the New Frontier. Just a great slogan. What does that mean? I don't care. I know he's looking out for us. Lyndon Johnson had an effective one called the Great Society. All the way today. I mean, people can now, President Trump's slogan, we stole from Ronald Reagan. Make America Great Again. That was Reagan had Let's Make America Great Again. It's now become an acronym. You don't even know what it means. It's really effective. By the way, I'm not saying that's good. And I'm not saying that's bad. But I think you have to decide because there's issues with that. So they soon would dub this the Log Cabin Campaign because they try to portray him as a Westerner. A Democratic newspaper foolishly attacked him for this. Said that William Henry Harrison is nothing but a puppet and doesn't know any details. And he would rather sit on the front porch of his log cabin and drink hard cider than care about the issues of the American people. So a Democratic newspaper, it's got named L. Sullivan. Ironically, he's the same guy who came up with the term manifest destiny, but he called him ignorant. But by saying he wants to sit on the front steps of his front porch of his log cabin and drink hard cider, the Whigs are like, thank you. That's exactly what we want people to believe. He's just a regular guy in a log cabin. And so they quickly built a log cabin on his plantation, out of sight from his massive mansion that he lived in. This huge mansion. Couldn't see it. Now, people did not campaign for themselves back then. That would not happen until the end of the century. But the reporters would visit him, and he would sit on the front steps of this log cabin they hastily built, and he would literally sip hard cider and act like a commoner, and it worked for the image they wanted. So you start getting log cabin, hard cider, log cabin almanac, all this stuff they could portray. The Democrats fell for the trap. And Martin Van Buren, who was dirt poor, the Whigs portrayed him as the elite, sitting in the White House enjoying the fine life, while Harrison's out there a frontiersman. And okay, that creepy picture. There was a little kid's toy back then. You look through a little biopic viewer, and you have a picture, and you look through it, and you turn the picture back for that two images, this one and this one, for example, and it gave the illusion of movement from smiling to frowning. Okay, we might not think it's much, but don't forget this is also 1840, and they're trying to give a little kid, and it's Martin Van Buren drinking White House champagne, the drink of the elite, right? Spa, the elite. But you give him some log cabin hard cider and look at his face. And they even pushed a game. It was a craze from Britain that Martin Van Buren had installed in the White House. He had a billiards table, pool. He had a pool table. That was a game of the elite, which also strikes me as funny today. But, and I like pool, but not very good, but I like it. And it worked. It worked so well. And they even did they did kind of campaign get-togethers, but they did these massive rallies for the Whigs, where they would come into town and do a massive parade. And they would have, carry or have wagons, what we would call today for a parade, a float, that wasn't made yet, of like log cabins. The first campaign buttons would be a little log cabin you would wear on your lapel to show you're a Whig. And they would go through town and have the thing with marching band, here's a log cabin. They even had a thing called the Whig rolling ball. The big leather ball they would roll from town to town and go through and kind of lead the parade. And they had little slogans like, to guide the ship, old Tip. The Democratic ball sent on. Take well, dear Van, not the man. Okay. And they'd all celebrate, cheer. People would follow the parade through town. And at the end of the parade, there'd be a big barbecue and free food for all the people. Remember, the Whigs bought it for you. And barrels and barrels and barrels of what kind of drink? Hard cider. They drink that. Oh, thank you, Whigs. Kind of blew the Democrats away. Are you kidding me? How is this working? And here's another one. So it's showing Jackson's policy, it's full of hickory. The Kinderhook fox is caught. He's caught in a log cabin. Can't get out because of hard cider. It blew the Democrats away. How could people fall for this? They couldn't, they were shocked that people were falling for this obvious campaign ploy. It works, especially for people who are so busy with life they can't pay attention to all the details. I mean, following this is hard. Don't believe me? Just follow what was happening in the bill to reopen the government. It'd blow your mind, all the little things we're putting in that bill. It could be, you might agree or disagree. Some of you know, some of you don't, but we're busy. So, the hard road to hoe. And here's Martin Van Buren, that's his treasury, independent treasury, sub-treasury. And he's trying to get to the White House, following Jackson's policies. But look at the hard cider and log cabin in his way. He can't get there. He's going to go back to Old Kinderhook, so back to Kinderhook County. Remember, his nickname was Old Kinderhook. And here is somebody giving him a little bit of insult. Can you see that? You may know what he's doing there. This little thing right there. I know my first impression was, why is there a half pig, half man there? But doing this. That was an insult. So, you have to make that sound. And the Democrats try to say, no, he's one of us. He was born with nothing. He's one of us. He wasn't born on a plantation. He wasn't born rich like Harrison. He's Old Kinderhook. He's Old Kinderhook. He's okay. And that's where okay. The term okay came from Old Kinderhook in the election of 1840. So if anybody says okay, it came from this election. And another thing came from this election. The Harrison campaign bought so much alcohol from one family distillery in Illinois that the name of this distillery became synonymous with alcohol. Became so synonymous that the family changed their name. Anybody want to guess? Have you ever heard of booze? It was the Booze Distillery. So this election gave us okay and booze. And the amazing thing about okay, it's internationally known. You can go almost any place and say it's okay. People know what they're talking about. It's kind of amazing how that little term from Old Kinderhook would become so well known. That might make a good bonus question down the road. But when the election finally happened, the purple of the Whigs. The purple of the Whigs. And it was a national election. That's what we have to get. The Whigs won a national election. They won the majority in the North and the South. They actually also swept the House and the Senate. It blew the Democrats away. They're saying, wait a second, how could the common man finally get the vote and then vote for policies that won't help them? Even though, let's be clear, the Democrats really didn't have a policy either. They was more just kind of a feeling. But Van Buren lost his own state. They lost Jackson State. It was a shocking victory. But, the popular vote, but remember, that doesn't matter, but it was 7%. That's a big victory. That's a big victory. Shocking. And the Democrats, what did they decide to do in the next campaign? Oh my God. Look what the Whigs do. We're going to have to go educate voters and try to teach them of the issues so they vote for us. Anybody believe they did that? Have I got a bridge for you? What did the Democrats do? They started doing some stuff. And this is what you have to get down for 1840. 1840 would be such an important election because it would prove that image would become more important than anything else. And if you could portray an image, you could get enough of the story. You could make people believe that image. I mean, I can still remember George W. Bush running for president in 2000, and he's from a rich, aristocratic family. His dad moved to Texas, so he tried to act, he had a Texan accent, but their family was from Kennebunkport, Maine. Rich, financier, old money. And yet they try to portray him as this kind of average commoner. And they even bought a ranch during the campaign. So they do publicity photos of him out there with a chainsaw cutting down brushwood. When he was just, no, that wasn't him. Did it work? You have to work with everybody. You just have to work with a few. And it was just enough, even though he lost the popular vote, but just enough to get the electoral victory. So, big deal. And the Democrats would join in too. Well, Harrison's going to be the oldest man ever elected president. Did I hit record? Give me a sec. William Henry Harrison was the oldest man ever elected president. No, he was 68. The oldest man ever elected president. I did record this. We are okay. Everything's cool. So, inauguration then was in March. And he wanted to prove two things. First off, he was not a puppet of Henry Clay, and he knew the issues. And secondly, I am young, fit, and vigorous despite my age. And so he planned on giving a long inaugural address. And to this day, it is still the longest inaugural address. I guess it was not very interesting. This was a time where people had much longer attention spans than today. So they expected longer speeches, but still, it was not considered all that great of a speech. But it laid on the issues. The problem was it was a cold, rainy day, and he was already ill. He did not feel well at all. He was given that speech. And to prove he could stand up to the climate, he did not wear his long shawl, so he had basically a cape. And he did not wear his beaver felt hat, so he could face the weather. 2 days after this, he became, he was already sick, so whatever he was sick of before, and they didn't know, would get worse. Within a week, he was bedridden. Within 3 weeks, he was in and out of consciousness. And a little bit over a month into his presidency, William Henry Harrison, that's the inaugural address, and that's his deathbed, became the first American president to die in office. The first American president, William Henry Harrison. Who's president now? Who? Who's president when he died? John Tyler. And there's no vice president. So the next in line speaker in the House. Constitution didn't account for that. First president to die, William Henry Harrison. Now, what did he die of? It was not a cold. What did he die of? Cholera. Cholera was just starting to spread around the world. Cholera was becoming an international pandemic. It basically, cholera was picked up from, probably brought back from India, even though it had spread throughout Asia. You may know how cholera spread. No. No. No, good guess. So we're coming to mosquito-borne diseases soon. People matter in water. And that gives you an idea how bad the water is. One of the most important advances in human history will be clean water. But he would be the first of 3 presidents to die of cholera, or at least contract cholera while they're president. 3 cholera. So now John Tyler is president. Not Henry Clay, who ran the House of Representatives, and I should add, he kept Harrison's cabinet that was made up solely of Northern Whigs. Clay's American system was what Henry Clay wanted. And he had his chance. He knew he could get it through Congress. And he got it all passed. Most importantly, got a new bank in the US passed and got a tariff, more higher tariffs. So everyone got that, got tariffs and bank, the American system. Got it passed. Now, Tyler and Southern Whigs did not want the American system. They just hated democracy. But Clay just assumed there's no way that Tyler would ever veto the signature policy of the Whigs, the American system, even though Southern Whigs didn't want it. But guess what Tyler did? Is there a problem? Oh, internal improvements. Yeah, roads. The big thing was that Clay's plan was then to give federal government money for railroads. But the first thing was the bank and tariff. He vetoes. He uses a veto. The Whig president vetoed the signature Whig policy. So, Whigs, Henry Clay made it very clear, you got to pass this. You're in this party. And so they passed it again. They didn't have enough votes to override the veto. So they passed it again. He vetoed it again. And now Clay is furious. And they realize Tyler will never support the policies that they said the Whigs were elected to do. So they kicked him out of the party. Tyler was kicked out of the Whig Party. The thing was, Tyler had already left the Democratic Party, and they hated him too. So you have a president without a party. Tyler will become probably the most hated president in America. Now, I may talk about effectiveness. I mean, nobody liked him. Northern Whigs hated him. All Democrats hated him. Only a few Southern Whigs, the big plantation owners, liked him. And that was it. And Tyler, who was just a seething pool of resentment and anger, wanted revenge. And I will show you. And that was the situation. I should have one more thing about John Tyler, so I don't forget to say. He'd be married twice, and he'd be 68 years old the last time he would father a child. And that son would be 78 years old the last time he fathered a child. And so John Tyler's grandson, President Tyler became president in 1841. His last grandson died 4 years ago. Isn't that kind of amazing? And also 78-year-old, 68 years old. Moving on. And if you're not sure how this happened, once again, involves a stork, you figure it out. Oh, I should add, all the Whigs in his cabinet resigned. The only one that stayed on was the Secretary of State, Daniel Webster, and he would negotiate an incredibly important treaty called the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, 1842. And it was a treaty with Britain to finally deal with the Great Lakes, and showed that Britain and the United States were close. And then Webster immediately resigned. Immediately. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Now, it dealt with the Maine border too. And there was a war called the Aroostook War. It was basically a lumberjack war over this area here. And I get this image of lumberjacks fighting each other on trees. And I think it'd be kind of cool. I mean, could you imagine a guy from trees with double-bladed axes? But yeah. But actually, it was a lumberjack war. But basically over good timberland. It's at the Maine border here. Big deal. Then Webster probably resigns. So that is the last big treaty, and we're coming to. So what is now the biggest issue? And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. Now, I'm going to let you look at the quiz we took on. Have I got everyone's taken it now, right? In here. You have not taken it? We have three people have not taken it. So you're not. I'll hand this out, let you look at your score, those who took it. Actually, we're just gonna have to wait. I did type it in, but we're just not gonna do it. So many people have not taken it. But you're not talking to me about when you're gonna take it. You have to talk to me. You can't just show up and expect to take it. It doesn't work that way. What do you think came from the election of 1840 again? Okay, move. Yeah. I won't say on the quiz. I had a lot of 100%. I did put it in your grade book. If you have not looked, it's in the grade. It's on the computer. I had lots of people got 100%. Lots. Lots of people did. Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. I'm gonna look out that. Stock market is crashing and civil for the government.
Wait, I just saw when you went over.
I'll try to, I'll read it. We do it Monday, so you gotta remember, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Sure, we'll see you